tonight to Proverbs chapter 25. Proverbs chapter 25. It was green a moment ago. Proverbs chapter 25. I love the book of Proverbs. I read not every day in the book of Proverbs, but almost every day. One of the books of wisdom. Psalms gives me peace and tranquility in the midst of a tumultuous life. Proverbs helps give me wisdom for decisions that need to be made and just some guidance and truth. And so that's one of the reasons why I read it on a regular basis. But in Psalm, I'm not going to have you stand, but just looking here at one verse, Proverbs chapter 25, verse 25 says, "As cold waters to a thirsty soul, so is good news from a far country." As cold waters to a thirsty soul, so is good news from a far country. Father, I ask you to be with us in these next few minutes as we just kind of break this verse down and apply it to our lives, those people around us. Lord, would you guide us in truth? In His name we pray. Amen. I love the Bible in the way that it paints word pictures that are understandable. As cold waters to a thirsty soul. Right now, nobody outside is needing a glass of cold water because it's not hot, it's not humid, it's not normal southern weather, what I consider. You get down here in July and August, and I'm not a water drinker, but I'm looking for a water because it's always so warm. But it says as cold waters. Most of the water that comes out of the ground is cold. Occasionally you will find some hot springs, and those are the areas that people go for vacation, or the mineral springs or something like that. When the Hickses were up in Fairbanks, we went to Sheena Hot Springs or something like that. I mean, here's this almost too warm water to be able to get in to sit there and enjoy the snow that was surrounding us when it was 30 below, sitting out there. But most of the water that comes out of the ground is cold. It amazes me how God created the world, that not only does the water come out cold, but it's refreshing. He could have made it so it was lukewarm, right? He could have made it so it was all hot, but He makes it so that it comes out cold. He makes it so that it's not just in the low areas of the earth, but cold water, and it comes from the mountains also. And it's not just snow melted off. We had an opportunity to be in Israel here a few years ago, and we were up by the caves where David hid out when King Saul was after him. Right up there in the mountains, here's this stream coming out of a rock. Cold, clear water. So whoever the person was that penned this down, whether it was Solomon or David, I didn't really look it up to try and figure out who it was that penned it, spent some time in a hot, dry, thirsty area and was refreshed and revived by the cold water. Cold water refreshes on a hot day. We have not too far from where we used to live in Amarillo, Wisconsin, before we moved over to Oshkosh, there's an artesian well. And literally all throughout the year, people are going, and somebody finally drove a pipe down into the water there, or down into the earth. And so people show up with their empty milk jugs to get fresh, cold water out of the artesian well because it doesn't have the chemicals and everything that the city puts in it to make it taste funny, which is another. Water has so little taste, unless it's got fluoride in it. Another reason I don't really like water. Cold water, that's cold water to a thirsty soul. It refreshes and it revives. A good example of that that I was able to think of, the first time that I noticed that, is Hagar and Ishmael. Abraham has been told you're going to have a son. Abraham and Sarah kind of laugh about the whole thing. Do you realize how old we really are to have children? I'm 70. Cheryl's a little bit older than I am. I really wouldn't want to start having children all over again. I enjoy having the grandchildren. I enjoy visiting them. I enjoy having them come over. I enjoy them coming and staying with us. But I don't want to raise any more kids. I mean, anyway, so God tells them they're going to have a child. Well, they get in a hurry there in Genesis. And so Hagar comes into the scene. Sarah's handmaid has Ishmael. things go along fairly well for the first handful of years, and then along comes Jacob. Along comes Abraham. Along comes Isaac. Along comes Isaac. And then there's this conflict. And so finally Sarah says, look, this is not going to work out. We can't have two situations, two families here. And the Bible tells us there in Genesis chapter 21, it was a grief. It was a grief to Abraham. This is his first son. And they ask him to leave. They get Hagar and Ishmael get out in the desert. She finally puts him under I forget what the Bible says, under a bush, I think it is. And she cries out to the Lord. They're about to perish there. And God says, I hear the voice of thy son. And has her turn around and look, and there's a well of water right there. The first time we find this cold water refreshing and reviving somebody, it was with Hagar and Ishmael. The second time that I thought about it was Samson. He gets into a big battle with 1,000 of the Philistines, slays 1,000 of them with a jawbone of an ass. And his statement at the end of this big long battle, after he kills them all, he says, am I not going to perish from lack of water after all this? And God provides water which not only refreshes him, but revives him. As cold waters are to a thirsty soul. It doesn't say to a thirsty man or a thirsty person, it says thirsty soul. There's a spiritual application to that. As cold waters to a thirsty soul, so is good news from a far country. Spiritually, it's already been brought up. The opportunity to be able to be together and laugh and enjoy ourselves, to be able to share how God is blessing us, to be able to talk about how God is taking care of us through thick and thin, through the good times, through the bad times, and how God watches over us even in the little things. We have a spiritual aspect to a thirsty soul to hear from afar. So is good news from a far country. Having been in the military, having people in the military, it's always interesting that I remember what it was like years and years ago, back when I was in, that you look forward to the package. I was just telling somebody the other day, my mom discovered that when she read it someplace, that if you packed stuff, and I don't really remember what else she sent other than peanut butter and chocolate chip cookies, if you packed it in popcorn, it was reusable. I actually like stale popcorn. Popcorn that is 3 weeks old really doesn't taste that. Really doesn't. At least it didn't back then. I haven't had any really stale popcorn since. But we always look forward to mail calls to hear from that far country. Our oldest daughter and son-in-law, they were in Zambia, Africa for 10 years. And Cheryl and I had an opportunity to go over and visit them. And I watched them as they went to the mailbox every day. Either one of them would go or they'd send one of the children. Why? Because they were always looking for that good news from a far country. Back then when they were in Zambia, the communication was very, very bad. So we would try to call them, and it was always hit or miss on the phone. I mean, we called them the day that 9/11 happened. They hadn't heard anything about that. I mean, we had to call and give them the news because they didn't have TV coverage of the world like we have over. They didn't have internet at the time. They didn't have a good radio system to be able to keep track of what's going on. So to get a letter, not just from home, but from one of their supported churches that said, we're praying for you. You may be gone. You maybe have been gone for 3 or 4 years, but you are not forgotten. We want you to know that you are being prayed for. This is a great time of the year. If you have not taken down the email address of one of your missionaries back, especially the ones that are on a foreign field and have not communicated with them, please do it before Christmas comes and let them know. Look, I don't know what to say. Tell them about the Christmas program. Tell them about, we had an ice storm and Sunday school was canceled, but we had morning service, and those that couldn't make it, we've got internet now, so you can actually log in and be able to watch some of the service. Let them know that they are not forgotten. As cold waters to a thirsty soul, so is good news from a far country. One of my best friends lives over in Sofia, Bulgaria. Jeff and I text back and forth on Mondays. Mondays used to be his language school day. He's not doing language school on Mondays anymore, but he bought a big fancy We Love cooked meat. And so we're always talking about what we're smoking, what we're grilling, whatever. So every Monday, I'm usually at my desk at 9 o'clock in the morning. It's 5 o'clock in Sofia, it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon in Sofia. And Jeff will send me a picture and tell me what he's having for supper. It's a small thing, but through that I find out how was your week? How many people were at church? What took place since last Monday? The communication of good news from a far country. So there's a spiritual aspect of it. In the New Testament, if you turn over to 1 Corinthians chapter 16, 1 Corinthians, I'm actually going to have you look at a couple of verses and not just ramble around up here for several minutes. We see this application of good news from a far country. You're in 1 Corinthians chapter 16, beginning in verse 15. It says, I beseech you, brethren, ye know the house of Stephanas, that it is the first fruits of the Achaia, and that they have addicted themselves to the ministry of the saints. They didn't have internet back then. They didn't really have a good communication system, but they went out of their way to be able to take care of people that were traveling through their area. Not only were they a good example of that, they themselves actually traveled to be able to be a help to Paul. Look down here at verse 16. That ye submit yourselves unto such, and to everyone that helpeth with us and laboreth. I am glad for the coming of Stephanas and Fortunatus and Achaicus, for that which was lacking on your part they have supplied, for they have refreshed my spirit in yours. Paul said, just by them coming, it was refreshed. Good news from a far country. We were able to find out what was going on over in over in Corinth. At that time, it wasn't a huge church, but there was not that Paul had invested a large amount of time over there. What's going on? And so they came over and gave a report. It says, refreshed our spirit, refreshed my spirit, and yours. How did they refresh it? When they came back and gave a report to the church and said, okay, we told Paul what was going on, and we took over these goodies and gifts and things that to be able to help meet some of the physical needs that they had. But then they went back to Corinth and gave a report as to what Paul had been accomplishing with the men that had been traveling with him. It wasn't just all chained up in prison time. He had the opportunity to be able to speak to people about spiritual things several times along the way. So they were all concerned about Paul's physical welfare, physical being, as he's spending some time in prison. But he said, look, it's not all bad. The Lord has given me opportunity to talk to people that I normally would never come in contact with, as cold waters to a thirsty soul. So it's good news from a far country. In the New Testament, we find the short phrase, good news. Many times it's referred to as good tidings. Turn back to Luke chapter 2. Pastor was talking about, preaching about the Christmas season, and it is so true. I've been saved and going to church for close to 40 years now. It's not been 40 years. And it's true. Thanksgiving time, I know with my pastor, we have a new pastor. How long has Pastor P been there? 6 years. So we're still breaking the odds. He's got a pattern. On the Sunday before Thanksgiving, or on that Wednesday, he always preaches out of Psalm 107. Every single time for 6 years. Christmas rolls around. As Pastor mentioned this morning. We know, well, okay, I know what Pastor's going to talk about. Well, what aspect is Pastor? Is he going to talk about the angels that brought the good news? Is he going to talk about Mary and Joseph? I mean, what aspect? Are you going to talk about the babe in the manger? Is he going to talk about what Christ was like before he became a babe? What aspect of the Christmas story is Pastor going to cover? We know what's going to be covered, but I actually look forward to coming to church to find out, okay, what are we going to hear? What are we going to learn? It's not always because I want to learn some new thing Tell me the old story.
Amen.
I want to hear it again. I don't know about you. I didn't get saved until I was 31. I often have said I was 62 before God broke even. 31 wasted years where I did absolutely nothing for the Lord. Now I'm not going to say that since I've been saved, since then that it's been all profitable or great or marvelous years. God's been good. As you said, we've been blessed just by living in America. But you live in America and you get saved and you've got a good church too and you've got church family. We've been blessed. We've been blessed. One of the advantages of being able to do a bunch of traveling, we were in Sofia, Bulgaria in September, and then we were in Croatia, and watching in Croatia, they've got a nucleus of a church right now. When we first got there with a group of 36 people, they had about 9 people consistently coming to church. Right now, they've got about 30 people consistently coming to church. Over in Sofia, Bulgaria, there wasn't one. We went over there with 34 people just to be able to pass out the John Romans, invite people out to the preaching service to try and get a Bible study started. Right now, Brother Jeffrey Gallis has got 11 people consistently coming to the Bible study saying, okay, this isn't going to stop, is it? I mean, we are eventually going to become a church and everything, aren't we? To realize that a city in Sofia, Bulgaria, almost 2 million people, there's one good independent Baptist church. There are 2 other Baptist churches there, but they're national Baptist churches. What that means is they don't practice and think the same way that we do as far as biblical principles. They use real wine for communion. The Bible says that. That's rooted. They use real wine for communion. You can lose your salvation under their teaching. Saved forever, eternal security. Well, that's an American doctrine. So it's not that there aren't a couple other Baptist churches there, but right now there's only one independent Baptist church and one Bible study for almost 2 million people. Who showed up with the cold water? We did. It was good news from a far country. We'll let them know. Look, there's hope. There's truth. There's things that you don't know. You may be religious, but you're missing the boat. Everybody's not standing over there waiting to get a copy of John Romans to get invited out to a preaching service. We had one guy just absolutely, he just went crazy. You're worse than a bunch of drug dealers. Really? But that was their outlook on Americans coming over here to tell us about God. Look, we didn't come to tell you necessarily about God. We came to give you a portion of the Bible, and if you come to the meeting, we'll give you a Bible so you can read for yourself in your own language what the Bible says. How it's good news from a far country that was planned out years and years ago. Speaking of that, turn back to we never did. Did I sidetrack myself? We never did Luke chapter 2. Luke chapter 2, down here in verse 10, and the angel said unto them, Fear not, for behold, I bring you good tidings. That's good news. Good tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people. Not just a certain group of people, but to all people. I was thinking about it when Pastor was reading through the passage of Scripture this morning. When the wise men showed up, who showed up right away? Well, the shepherds showed up. We know that maybe a handful of townspeople showed up. It doesn't really say anything about townspeople, but the shepherds showed up. But as far as we know, according to Scripture, those were about the only Jewish people that show up. The wise men were Gentiles. That's us. Good news to all people. The real good news, turn back to Isaiah chapter 52. Planned out from before the foundation of the world. Isaiah chapter 52. If you have an old Schofield, it's on page 760. Sometimes I have to write the. I hate standing up when you're trying to preach and you're looking for Nahum. Where in the world is Nahum? I should have stuck a bookmark in it. But in Isaiah 52, beginning in verse 6, it says, "Therefore, my people shall know my name. Therefore, they shall know in that day that I am he that does speak. Behold, it is I. How beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of them that bringeth." Let me try that again. "How beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of him that bringeth good tidings, that publisheth peace, that bringeth good tidings of good, that publisheth salvation, that saith unto Zion, Thy God reigneth." The reason I said Nahum, this almost identical words over in Nahum chapter 1, verse 5. But it paints another word picture. Turn over to Romans chapter 10. Again, those verses in Isaiah and Nahum are brought out here in what we commonly call the end of the Romans road. In Romans chapter 10, verse 15, it paints again another very clear word picture that's almost identical, almost runs parallel to Psalm chapter 25, verse 25, Proverbs 25, verse 25. In Romans chapter 10, verse 15, "How shall we preach except to be sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of them that preach the gospel of peace, and bring glad tidings of good." How beautiful are the feet. It paints a word picture that's understandable. Anybody who's made a mission trip understands even better. We were talking on the way to church. I wear cowboy boots usually whenever I'm preaching. I used to wear them all the time, and I've discovered sometimes walking shoes are a little bit more comfortable if I'm going to walk several miles in a day. But I find cowboy boots comfortable. We spent some time in Dallas, and I was a pretend cowboy for about 3 years. I didn't like horses. But we're talking on the way to church, and I said, "Anna, did you notice Trent's got his cowboy boots on?" I'm trying to brainwash all the boys that they need to have cowboy boots. But we're talking about cowboy boots. Well, once I take my boots off, there's a reason why we wear boots and socks. You ever seen old people's gnarly feet? I used to work in a nursing home. Mr. Ingalls, I can't bend over and cut my toenails. Oh, thanks. But the Bible paints a much better word picture. How beautiful are the feet of them that preach the gospel of peace. When missionaries go to the foreign country, they are not bringing convert or die. They're bringing the good news. They're bringing the good tidings that preach the gospel of peace and bring glad tidings of good things. Turn over to 1 Thessalonians chapter 3. 1 Thessalonians chapter 3. Page 1268 in your old book. I did have a bookmarker in there. 1 Thessalonians chapter 3. I like to try and find Bible examples. I will use a lot of illustrations and a lot of examples from my own personal life, from things that we've seen or done or whatever. But I really prefer Bible illustrations of a point that God has brought out in the scriptures. And we have here in 1 Thessalonians chapter 3 a picture of both being refreshed as you would be with the cold waters and good news. 1 Thessalonians chapter 3 verse 1. "Wherefore, when we could no longer forbear, we thought it good to be left at Athens alone, and sent Timotheus, our brother and minister of God, and our fellow laborer in the gospel of Christ, to establish you and to comfort you concerning your faith, that no man should be moved by these afflictions. For yourselves know that we are appointed thereunto." We all go through afflictions. Some of it's physical, some of it's mental, some of it's just life itself. But we all go through it. It's nothing new, especially to the believers. Verse 4, "For verily, when we were with you, we told you before that we should suffer tribulation. even as it came to pass, and ye know. For this cause, when I could no longer forbear, I sent to know your faith, lest by some means the tempter have tempted you, and your labor, and our labor be in vain. Verse 6. But now, when Timotheus came from you unto us and brought us good tidings of your faith and charity, and that ye have good remembrance of us always, desiring greatly to see us, as we also to see you. Therefore, brethren, we are comforted over you in all our affliction and distresses by your faith. Paul was concerned about them over in Thessalonica. So he sends Timotheus over there. He gives the report back. He said, look, you're going through afflictions, we're going through afflictions. But it's cold waters to a thirsty soul, so it's good news from a far country. To hear that you're still there. To hear that you're still serving God. To hear that your faith is still growing. Therefore, brethren, we are comforted over you in all our affliction and distress by your faith. For now we live if you stand fast in the Lord. When we were in Zagreb, Croatia, the first 2 days that we were passing out John and Romans, we had a container that got delayed on the way over. Had a very nice, fancy cover on it. A nice picture of of a location in the city that everybody's going to recognize. But the container had not arrived yet, so Brother Lowry says, well, I've got some tracts and some of the old John Romans is just a blue cover with just a black printing on the front of it, nothing fancy. Well, on the back of those, he had his address with his phone number on it. On the new ones, it had his address, the church address, and the web page, but it didn't have his phone number on it. So we were a little bit distraught that they didn't have all the information the first 2 days. We were passing out what I call the plain John and Romans. So we passed those out. Finally, the container comes. We unload the container. Now we've got the good news. It's got an attractive cover on it. It's got an illustrated tract in the front of it, which I've showed you before. And it's going to draw them in. They're going to be pleased by looking at the cover. Good impression of the first time that they get some literature from us. It's got the illustrated tract that's going to give them the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. It's got a little short Bible study in it. Then I'll watch them through the scriptures. Again, so 3 times they get the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Well done. All the information you just flip over in the back. Over there, it's not any different than over here. You see something and you say, I wonder what that's all about. And so we grab our phone and we Google it to find out, well, who's this group? Who's this church? What time are the services over at Gateway Baptist Church? I did that last night. What time are the services at Gateway? We use our phone to check on everything. That was the importance of having the connection with the website on the back of the new John Romans. So when they got the information, they could sit down in the comfort of their own home, look it over, think about it, go check the website that gives them some more information about us and about the Lowrys, and then they can make that decision. Should we go or should we go? Should we at least go to the big Bible study, the big preaching service they're going to have? That way we can at least get a Bible. I mean, we're going to have a Bible in our house. We can at least go get a Bible. We're talking to Brother Lowry. He called, I don't know, about a month after we've been there. And he told us this story. He says, remember those old John Romans that we passed out that didn't have all the info? All it had was my name and phone number on it. He says, some lady, some 77-year-old lady, a Catholic lady, who's been going to church for most of her life, got one of those. And she called me and said, I got this little booklet that's got Bible verses in it. I need somebody to come and explain this to somebody. I need to talk to somebody. Are you a pastor or what? Can you come to my house and talk to me about this little booklet that somebody gave to me? So he went over there with one of the men from the church, Philip from the church, and they sat down and they explained the good news of salvation, the glad tidings, the gospel to her. She sat there and she listened to it. She prayed and got saved. She's now coming to the church. Her comment was, I have never heard that salvation and eternal life is a free gift. This is a lady that's been a Catholic all of her life. most of the people that you and I run into up in Oshkosh, you're either Lutheran or Catholic. That's just what we are up there. We just assume because people are familiar with quote unquote the Christmas story, the babe in the manger, that they're familiar with Good Friday, which I think was actually Thursday, but Easter Sunday. They've got the information. It's just them putting it together. Sometimes it just takes us explaining. Here's a lady that was been religious all of her life. She wasn't a communist. She wasn't an atheist. She wasn't an agnostic. She was religious. But he never sat down and had somebody explain the truth that salvation and eternal life was free. Yesterday you and I went to Verizon? No, the day before we went to Verizon. Had to get a thing fixed on my, adjusted on my phone, logged on in the phone system. And Jeremiah and I are sitting there talking to this guy, find out he's from Wisconsin. How in the world did you end up down here? That's usually my first question. I think I asked you that. How in the world did you end up down here? His dad was career Army, so when his dad got out of the Army, they settled in Toma, Wisconsin. There's a big VA hospital there, and so his family settled there. So he lived there, grew up most of his life there, and then he moved to Mecca, Green Bay, Wisconsin, where the Green Bay Packer Failing team is playing these days. But he moved up to Green Bay and said, I live in Oshkosh. He said, I know where that is. I've driven through Oshkosh several times. Well, he and I sat there and talked after he got my phone up and running. And I reached in my pocket and I realized I don't have a Gateway Baptist Church in tract or anything in my pocket. I haven't been over the church house yet. Didn't think to ask Jeremiah or Katie before I left the house if they had anything that I could at least carry in my coat pocket when I'm traveling. But so I pulled out a Wildwood Baptist Church tract and I said, here, next time you're coming through Oshkosh, please stop by and visit us. But I said, this man here, my son-in-law, Jeremiah, I said, he goes over to Gateway Baptist Church. It's just down the road, a little ways from where you are. And so tomorrow, I'm going over and giving him the bulletin, and then there's an advertisement with the Christmas program, really. I'm going to invite him out to the Christmas program. Now, I'm not going to be here. Whether he will come or not, somebody needs to be alert to the people around us to give them the good news. It's a cup of cold water. That's cold waters to a thirsty soul, so it's good news from a far country. I didn't on purpose travel all the way down to Clarksville, Tennessee to get a cold. Thank you, family. And to witness the guy over at Verizon. But the Lord worked out an opportunity for me. We had a connection to be able to give an invitation, to invite him out, to go back and maybe walk him through the plan of salvation and ask him, if you died today, do you know for sure you can go to heaven? Let me just close with this. Are you a thirsty soul? I'm assuming because it's Sunday night, the weather's a little bit inclement, that probably everybody in here is saved. I'm not sure about the real young children, but probably saved. But if you're not saved, best time of the year to get, one of the best times of the year to get saved. Are you a thirsty soul? Are you, or if you're saved, are you inquisitive? As Pastor was talking about this morning. Did you know that that good tidings and glad tidings are in the New Testament 8 times? I didn't know that till yesterday when I started sitting down and just thinking about what am I going to talk about? Obviously, I should probably talk about missions or something. I am crackling.
The antenna.
Listen to yourself when you. Are you inquisitive? Did you know that the word encourage or encouragement is not in the New Testament? I was shocked. Here's Paul, he's got all these preacher boys, all these men that travel with him, that he's dropping them off after they've spent some time with him and training them. He writes letters to them. Never one time does he says, I encourage you to do this. When he encourages them, if you read at the end of his letters, he almost always ends on a positive note, other than give each other a holy kiss. That's not always positive. Especially if you got a cold. But he never uses the word encourage or encouragement when he does it. Are you inquisitive? When you reading through your Bible, have you ever said, Pastor and I were talking about this, I saw the word fervent in the Bible. Well, how many times the word fervent's in the Bible? I wonder what that's all about. So I did a short little word study. Do you just come to church? Do you just read your Bible? Do you actually pay attention and say, I want to learn something? I've been in church been saved and in church for over 40 years. I don't know, have no idea how many messages I've heard over the years. I take notes on every message, and usually in my notes on the side or on the top of my paper, I'll write down a word or two of something. I need to look that up. He mentioned this word, or he mentioned this thought, other than the three wise men that are buried over in Germany. I didn't look that up yet. What's that about? How many times is that in the Bible? What's that talking about? Are you inquisitive? And then this is probably the easiest time of the year to be able to share somebody with the good news, the glad tidings. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to be here for the Christmas program, which Miss Anna is in, and so we're going to have to, hopefully somebody will record it or whatever, because I'm not skipping. Yeah, he pointed to the camera. I'm not skipping church, and they will say, stay home and watch my granddaughter in the Christmas play. But, I find it easier to invite people out for the Christmas, during the Christmas time, because we've got a Christmas program. Who doesn't like little children in the Christmas program? You never know for sure exactly what's going to happen. As good news, as cold waters to a thirsty soul, so as good news from a far country. Let's be concerned about those that are in a far country, whether they're in the military, whether they're part of the family, whether they're part of the mission family. Let's be concerned about them. Be in contact with them. Give them the word of the church. And then let's be busy about the Lord's business, getting out good news, good tidings of good. Father, I thank you for this time you've given to us to be able to look at your word, what has been mainly focused on